This is Berlin. The city is under blockade. All land routes have been cut off by Soviet forces. The future of over 2 million West Berliners hangs in the balance. June 1948, the Oval Office. The cabinet gathers for a conference with President Truman. 4 days prior, the Soviet Union blockaded the American, British, and French-occupied sectors of Berlin, with the divided city located 100 miles inside the Soviet-controlled zone of East Germany. There's no way for American food and fuel, the lifeline of its undernourished populace, to get through. The city only has 36 days' worth of food remaining, and only 45 days of coal. The world watches as the first act of the Cold War drama unfolds. But to understand the significance of this moment, we need to step back and examine the complex web of post-World War II politics that led to this crisis. The year is 1945. Nazi Germany has fallen. The Allied powers, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union divide the defeated nation into 4 occupation zones. Berlin, although located 100 miles within the Soviet-controlled Eastern Zone, is also split 4 ways. At first, cooperation seems possible, but as the dust of World War II settles, ideological differences between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union begin to surface. The Iron Curtain, as Winston Churchill famously described it, is descending across Europe. The situation in Berlin was a microcosm of the larger Cold War. You had democracy and capitalism in the Western sectors facing off against communism in the East. It was only a matter of time before tensions boiled over. By 1948, those tensions reached a critical point. The Western Allies introduced a new currency in their sectors of Germany and Berlin, aiming to stimulate the struggling post-war economy. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin saw this as a direct threat to Soviet influence. This currency reform is an act of economic warfare. We cannot allow the Western imperialists to undermine our position in Eastern Germany. Stalin's response was swift and severe. On June 24, 1948, all land routes to West Berlin were cut off. No trains, no trucks, no barges. Over 2 million West Berliners found themselves stranded in an island of democracy, surrounded by a sea of communism. The Western Allies faced a daunting choice: abandon Berlin or find a way to supply an entire city by air. The decision would shape the course of the Cold War. Enter General Lucius Clay, the US military governor in Germany. Clay was not a man to back down from a challenge. We cannot abandon these people. We've made a commitment to Berlin, and we must honor it. We'll supply them by air if we have to. And so Operation Vittles, as the Americans called it, or Operation Planefare for the British, was born. But the task ahead seemed impossible. At the start of the airlift, West Berlin needed a minimum of 4,500 tons of supplies daily just to survive. The Western Allies could only manage about 90 tons a day. The math didn't add up. Many thought it was a fool's errand, but the Allies were determined to prove the skeptics wrong. The Berlin Airlift officially began on June 26, 1948. C-47 Skytrains and C-54 Skymasters of the United States Air Force, alongside RAF Dakotas and Avro Yorks, formed the initial fleet. This is Airlift 301, on approach to Tempelhof. Visibility poor, requesting guidance. The early days were chaotic. Planes were arriving faster than they could be unloaded. The logistics were a nightmare, but gradually, under the leadership of generals like William Tunner, dubbed the transportation genius, the operation began to take shape. We're going to run this operation like a conveyor belt. Planes will land every 3 minutes. No stack-ups, no delays. We'll unload in under 30 minutes. This is going to be a non-stop operation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Tunner's methods worked. By fall, daily deliveries had increased tenfold, but the operation was far from smooth sailing. The harsh German winter of 1948 to 1949 posed significant challenges. Fog, snow, and ice threatened to ground the fleet. Yet the pilots persevered, often flying in conditions that would typically be considered too dangerous. We couldn't see a thing. The fog was so thick, you could almost reach out and grab it, but we knew that every flight counted. People were depending on us. The human toll of the airlift was significant. By the end of the operation, 101 fatalities would be recorded, including 31 Americans. Each loss was deeply felt, but it only strengthened the resolve of those continuing the mission. But amidst the danger and hardship, moments of humanity shined through, none more famously than the actions of Lieutenant Gale Halvorsen, who would become known as the Candy Bomber. Halvorsen noticed the children of Berlin watching the planes land. On a whim, he promised to drop candy for them on his next flight, wiggling his plane's wings as a signal. Those kids, they didn't ask for anything. They were just grateful for the flour, the coal, the basic necessities we were bringing. I thought, why not give them something to smile about? Halvorsen's small act of kindness grew into Operation Little Vittles, boosting morale and becoming a symbol of American generosity. It represented the human side of this massive operation and helped win the hearts and minds of Berliners. As 1948 turned to 1949, the Berlin Airlift had become a round-the-clock operation. At its peak, a plane was landing in Berlin every 30 seconds. The statistics were staggering. They were delivering everything: flour, coal, medical supplies, even sheets of glass to repair bombed-out buildings. At one point, they flew in an entire electric plant, piece by piece. It was a logistical marvel, but the Soviets weren't making it easy. They employed various tactics to disrupt the airlift. Soviet fighters would buzz Allied planes, playing a dangerous game of chicken in the air corridors. They also attempted to jam radio communications and used searchlights to blind pilots during night operations. You'd be flying along, and suddenly there'd be a Soviet Yak fighter right on your wing. They'd wave at you, then peel off. It was unnerving, to say the least. Despite these provocations, not a single Allied aircraft was shot down during the airlift. It was a testament to the pilot's skill and the operation's meticulous planning. As spring 1949 approached, something remarkable was happening. The airlift wasn't just sustaining West Berlin, it was allowing it to thrive. We Berliners have learned the meaning of freedom. We will never surrender it. The airlift is our lifeline, and we are eternally grateful to the Allied pilots who risk their lives daily for us. The resolve of the West Berliners, coupled with the success of the airlift, was putting increasing pressure on the Soviet Union. Stalin's blockade, intended to force the Western Allies out of Berlin, was backfiring spectacularly. On May 12, 1949, came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The Soviet Union announced it would end the blockade. The impossible had been achieved. Berlin had been saved by air power alone. But here's a little-known fact: the airlift didn't stop immediately. It continued for several months to build up a surplus of supplies in case the Soviets changed their minds.